Hello students, welcome back to our reading and writing skills class. For today's lesson, we'll be focusing on the properties of a well-written text. It is in continuation with what we've tackled last time, organization and coherence and cohesion. Now, we will have language use and mechanics. At the end of the session, you are expected to achieve the most essential learning competency, which is to evaluate a written text based on its properties, organization, coherence and cohesion, language use, and mechanics. So let's start. Language use is one of the clearest indicators of a well-written text. It enables writers to effectively communicate ideas without confusing the reader. To attain this, the language to be used must be specific, concise, familiar, correct, and appropriate. Language could be formal or informal depending on the context or situation. Let's have formal language. Formal language is generally the accepted standard and is widely used in books, magazines, newspapers, research papers, and journals. It is also the language that subscribes to the conventions in writing in which the tone, the choice of words, and the way the words are put in a less personal way. Notice that when you are writing for professional or for academic purposes, there is no use of colloquialism, contractions, or the first-person pronoun point of view. It is used in writing academics, business, and official text. In contrast with the formal language, we have informal language. It is what you use when you are talking to a friend, a family member, or someone you consider close to you. It is because the tone of informal language is more friendly and personal. It is more casual and spontaneous, which may include slang, local expressions, or even text messaging style of writing. Let's take a look at these examples. Number one, we asked the secretary to call the professor and get her permission for us to continue our research. The second sentence, we requested that the secretary contact the professor and obtain her permission for us to continue our research. If we're going to analyze it, in the first sentence, the writer used casual words such as asked, call, and get her permission, which made the sentence informal. In the second sentence, the writer used more serious words such as requested, contact, and obtain permission. This sentence is formal and is appropriate to use when talking to or writing to a person of authority. As a writer, you need to determine when it is appropriate to use formal language or informal language. And when you write, you should also make sure that the language you use is direct and simple for the readers to clearly understand the text. Use familiar words that are appropriate for an audience too. And you should also be sensitive enough to use unbiased language so that you will not offend any individual or any particular group of people. And biased language is language that is free of racial bias, free of religious bias, and free of gender bias. Let's take a look at these examples. First, a teacher should make it a point to motivate her students. The second sentence, teachers should make it a point to motivate their students. Let's analyze it. In the first sentence, the pronoun used was her. But teachers may also be male, so the statement shows gender bias. The second sentence, on the other hand, makes use of the gender-neutral pronoun their, making it unbiased. These are some problems in language use that writers must avoid. First, misused words. Second, words with unwanted connotations. And third, technical or highfalutin words. In misused words, words might be used incorrectly by writers, and this occurs when the word does not mean what he or she thinks it does. So, it is vital to be certain of the definition of a word before using it. Let's have this example. There are many behaviors that past societies considered legal but are now deemed immoral, including slavery, sexism, and racism. The writer confused the word amoral with immoral. The former means neither moral nor immoral, or without moral qualities, while the latter means not moral. Sometimes it is easy to guess the correct meaning of a word just by looking at how it is spelled. Words with unwanted connotations refers to the words that take on a meaning specific to a context. Depending on how a word has been used over time, it may have a positive or negative connotation. Some writers might not be aware of these connotations, so they end up using language that is unintentionally confusing, comical, or even offensive to readers. Let's take a look at this example. The Coast Guard salvaged Priscilla and her sister after their fishing boat was damaged in the storm. The word salvage means to save, usually from the wreckage of a marine vessel. However, in the Philippine context, the term was used to mean a violent killing, which is opposite from its traditional English meaning. Next problem is technical or highfalutin words. Some writers want to sound smart by using words that are very technical or have deep meanings. Though some writing genres require the use of such words, writers should still be careful about using them since they make readers work harder to understand text. Let's have this example. There is an ongoing discourse about the anti-establishment assemblage and the administrative political body. If we're going to analyze it carefully, the text is complicated because it is filled with words that are difficult to understand. If the terms are important to use, then the writer could define what they mean. Otherwise, the sentence could be rewritten simply this way. There is an ongoing discussion between the opposition and the government. This sentence still sounds smart, but it is easier for most people to understand, and it does not change the meaning of the original sentence in any way. When you use words improperly, readers are left confused as to what you are trying to say. So always choose words according to their correct definition and connotation. Also, keep your language simple enough to make your text easier for readers to understand. Now let's talk about the levels of language use. We have informal or personal, standard or academic, and business or technical. It is vital to know the levels of language use, for it affects the tone of the text and the reader's interpretation of it. Before writing, you have to think about and consider your target audience. For informal or personal, you're going to use slang, local expressions, or text messaging, just like in these examples. If it is standard or academic, it is widely accepted words and phrases found in books, magazines, and newspapers. This is the level of language that we use in schools. Next, we have business or technical. Under this, we have the scientific terms, jargons, and special expressions. It is the language used by a certain group, just like in the medical field, business, and other workplaces. We now proceed to the principles in language use or diction. Number one, omit needless words. Meaning to say, you're going to use brief words or phrases to make the statements shorter and more direct. Number two, use definite, specific, concrete language. You need to prefer definite to vague, specific from general, and concrete from abstract. Number three, use simple language. It is because you're going to write to express and not to impress. Avoid the use of cliché, redundancies, and highfalutin words. For number four, we have avoid sexist language. In this, you need to use nouns and pronouns that are gender neutral rather than gender specific. Let's have mechanics now. Mechanics are conventions that must be considered in writing. Some of these conventions are spelling, punctuation, and capitalization. It is important to know and observe these conventions in writing to avoid confusion. Mechanics also play an important role as one of the properties of a well-written text. Generally, mechanics is essential in all types of writing because it describes the technical aspects of writing. It also serves as a road sign to guide learners like you on how to use words appropriately in terms of conventions such as spelling, punctuation, capitalization, and others. Let's take a look at this given text. It is apparent that the example is quite difficult to read because of the lack of two important conventions, punctuations and capitalization. In addition, you cannot easily understand the message it sends across its readers. Let's compare it to the next text. As you can see, this second text is easier to read and understand. Through applying proper mechanics in writing, you can facilitate better transfer of message in your written text. You will never be lost if you keep in mind and follow the basic rules of subject-verb agreement, capitalization, punctuations, paragraphing, and even spelling. Let's talk about the conventions in writing. First, we have spelling. When you write, always make sure that you are consistently using one standard about the spelling of your words. Remember that there are slight differences in American English spelling and British English spelling. Take a look at these words. Before writing, think of your target audience. Whether you write using the British or American spelling, it is important to be consistent in spelling. If you are unsure of the spelling of a word, consult a dictionary or a spell checker. We have another convention in writing, that is capitalization. Capitalization is the act of writing the first letter of a word in uppercase while the rest of the letters are in lowercase. You must also remember that there are specific cases when special care must be followed. Just take note of these capitalization rules for you to use in writing your text. Punctuation is also one of the conventions in writing. It is the act of using a system of symbols such as the comma, period, quotation marks, question marks, and others that are used to give structure to and organize a text. The use of punctuation guides the readers regarding how the text should be read. That's all about the properties of a well-written text. Thank you for joining our class and see you in our next video lesson.